Hi guys, welcome to the Service Managers Hustings for next year. We've got 3 candidates tonight. We've got Sam, Isla and Christopher, sat in that order. As usual, we're going to start with the set question I sent them yesterday, and then they're going to have 4 minutes each to answer that. And if we can just remind you not to direct any questions in particular to any particular candidate. Okay, so the question is, it's in 2 parts. So part A, Services Manager is a role with lots of different aspects. What do you deem to be the most important facet of the role? And B, what qualities do you believe a good Service Manager has, and how have you displayed these qualities in the past? So we're going to start with Sam.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Sam. Thanks for all of you for coming. I think it's really important that you guys all turn up. Because it's really nice when you guys show that you care about something that we've been working really hard for. So what do I think is the most important part of this role? I think this is a really difficult question to answer because there are so many different aspects of it and so many different parts that mean different things to different people. Different things that fall under the jurisdiction of the services manager that are more important to some people than other people. I think the whole food side of everything is really important, but if I have to pick out something in particular that I think is most important, I would have to go. I'd have to say first and foremost that when I look at the word manager, the manager part of the title of the role, services manager, I see. What springs to mind isn't managing things, but managing people. And obviously, the services manager is part of the great team that is the exec, but also part of his or her own little team, I guess, which is obviously comprised of the Toasty Bar manager, the gym manager, the West Courtyard reps, etc. And I think that making a really good, solid team as a basis of what the services manager does is really important. First of all, picking the right people to do those jobs, and secondly, and perhaps more importantly, making sure they do those jobs to the best of their ability is so important. Obviously, there are lots of parts of the job where the responsibility lies solely on the services manager and and doesn't require anybody else in particular. And I'm not disregarding those for 1 second. Nor am I trying to deflect accountability and responsibility away from the services manager. All I'm saying is that if you've got a really strong team at the basis of everything that you're doing that accounts for such a large range of what the services manager does, then you've really built a foundation for success in the role as a whole. And also that takes the burden off some of the other areas that are where you've got more responsibility yourself. So moving on, the second part of the question was the qualities and characteristics that I think I would say that a service manager should have. I could sit here all night and probably list countless numbers of adjectives, of qualities and characteristics that I think are appropriate, that are suitable. But I think at the end of the day, there's perhaps the most basic and most simple of them all is probably the most important, and one that I guess that you can apply to any exec member, which is the ability to do the job well, whilst doing everything else, every other part of it, keeping up with every other part of your life, your academic commitments and so forth, because ultimately we are here to do a degree. And I'd like to think that I've displayed that ability throughout my whole life, but I think I'd like to think that I can sum it up and get my point across just based on this past week. I've obviously been canvassing you all, which, as much as it's been a very, very enjoyable and interesting experience, has also been a very time-consuming one. I've also had 2 football matches, a hockey match, lots of academic commitments, lots of essays around the corner. I had an interview for a telephone interview a couple of days ago, which I not only had to do, but also prepare for. And then to sum it all up, to cap it all off, I should say, I had my fun run last night. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think I've got the qualities to do this.
Hi guys, I'm Isla. It's been really nice to come around and canvass you all this week. You've all really decorated your rooms in a really fun way. That's not stalkerish, I genuinely am interested in how you've decorated things. And it's also been really nice to chat to all of you, particularly the people who I haven't really talked to since Freshers Week. Anyway, first aspect of Jimmy's question is, what is the most important part of services? And I've been thinking about this because you've got TVs, you've got office equipment, you've got formals, you've got dryers, which no doubt you're all very well, acquainted with right now, etc., etc. And again, I really appreciate that my manifesto does seem to be geared a lot towards the food in college. But I don't think that food is necessarily the most important part, as crucial as nutrition is. I think it's just the part that needs the most improvement. I think that all the parts sort of in combination really work together to create the services role, and without one you might not have the other. Equally, somebody who doesn't think that food needs improving on might think that video games need improving on. So what I'm trying to say is I think the most important part is how generalised a role it is. Services manager is definitely sort of the odd job man who you call upon if you've got a problem. But I think it's the liaison with the different exec members as well that's really important. Whether you're working with the campaigns officer and livers out rep to get people into formals, whether you're working with the USO and the SLO to see if you can get discounts on liver out brunches, whether you're working with the treasurer to make sure the JCR levies at the right amount to keep formal self-sufficient. And I think it all comes together to create the smooth running of JCR members' downtime, basically. As for what I think I have, qualities-wise, that is relevant to the role, I've sort of narrowed it down to, 4 general areas, what I'd like to think. The first one's sort of all in terms of approachability, visibility, willingness, and I'd like to think that being around during Freshers Week as a Freshers representative, being part of the welfare team, having done Nightline training, would all convey that. Equally, just being in college, my housemates joke that I leave on Monday morning and don't come back till Friday night, because I love this place so much. I think teamwork's really important, not just for inter-exec relations, but I think as being an exec member that can actually converse with people who are just ordinary members, well, not ordinary, you're all extraordinary, but other members of the JCR. And I'd like to think that my work on ENTS and as a junior duck rep last year would convey that. Organisation, as Sam's alluded to, is just so crucial to the whole role because you've got so many different things to coordinate with. You've got to get the vending machine stocked, you've got to get formal menus out, you've got to make sure that breakfasts are organised during examination period. And I'd like to think that having to be on the ball, especially time and date-wise with Floriat, would convey that. But I think with services, there also has to be a considerable degree of foresight. And, it's not just maintaining things as and when they come, but it's looking ahead. And particularly food-wise, that's continually working with the catering committee to try and find a happy middle ground for everyone, which I would like to think I've done as president of my student union. And I know that's a different kettle of fish to college and university life, but when you're working throughout the year to put in your uniforms with designs and embroidery and fabric, which incidentally I think is related to purchases manager, or when you're working to get the new catering company contract signed, so you're going to food tastings and getting surveys done to make sure that people who are kosher, halal, everything are catered for well, you've got to make sure that you're confident in your own competency to stay committed and know that the final goal will at some point actually be tangible and will be there soon. At the end of the day, it's also about pride, I think. I wouldn't be putting my name to something I didn't think I could do because I understand that doing services wrong has huge repercussions for the whole JCR. And I wouldn't want to do that to the hundreds of people that are part of Castle's community. I want to put my name to something I'm proud of and hopefully that you can be proud of as well.
Okay, so hi, I'm Christabel. I know everyone's already said this, but it is really nice to see so many people here, especially when there's 1,000,001 other things on tonight as well. So it's good that you've all managed to come along. So the first part of the question is, what do I think is the most important passive services manager? I think if you look at how many different things services manager does, you couldn't possibly say that it's okay to to prioritise certain things and then forget about other things. If you're saying things like, well, you know, it's okay that I haven't stocked the vending machine because, you know, it's not vital, so it doesn't matter. It's not acceptable. It's not something that you can, absolutely everything has to be done. You can't say, this is the most important thing, so I'm going to do that and I'll leave this other thing till later. You've got to make sure that you're doing everything and you've got enough time to do everything. Although I feel like I'm kind of floating around the question and avoiding answering it. So I'm sure everyone is expecting me to say that the most important thing about services manager is formals, given how often I go. But, okay. But I think it's the things that you don't necessarily notice them doing that are the most important things. Things like, which obviously has come up recently, laundry. It's something that you can't get by without. There's no way we could have a college. It would have an effect on people's like day-to-day lives. It affects absolutely everyone. So it's making sure getting things like that right is the most important thing, I would say, because they're the things that really affect everyone. Even people who don't necessarily want to get involved and don't want to come to formal, they're still going to be affected by the basic fundamentals like the laundry and the kitchens and stuff. As for qualities that I think that a services manager should possess, services manager is not a role that you can ever get any kind of credit for doing. People are never going to say, yeah, you're doing a fantastic job. It's only going to be people coming and saying, oh, we've got an issue with this, can you do that? And having worked at Waitrose, I've often responded to people having a go at me about things that are not necessarily my fault. And you've just got to take on board what they're saying and respond to it like that. You can't get annoyed at them for doing something wrong or put it off. You've got to then do it and respond to what they're saying. I think approachability is a very key point, and just people knowing who to contact. So I'm always in college. I feel like I'm always here. I'm sure many people see me around a lot. Not necessarily know me, but at least see that I'm around and am able to be approached and talked to about these things. I think one of the key points is also being there when you're needed and instantly responding to that. So again, when I was working at Waitrose, it's about not putting yourself first. So if, for example, you're on your break and someone asks you to do something, you can't say, oh, well, actually, I've got some time off at the moment. You've got to do it there and then. You've got to respond to that and do what is needed of you when it's needed. And I think another good point is tenacity. When you're dealing with outside companies and things, it's a case of sticking at it and making sure that they do these things for you. An example of that is when I helped to run this youth club, having to get in a youth worker to actually run it after I stopped doing it. We had to go through various committees, and the committees were so indecisive and just refused to put anything through. We went through meeting after meeting after meeting, and it's a case of just sticking at it until you get what you need done. So, yeah.
All right, guys, we'll take questions from the floor now. So, Ed at the back there.
How was the experience of your manifesto actually relevant to the role? How was that actually relevant to the role of services?
Okay, let's take the 3 key points in terms of what I've done as experience this year in particular. That's Floriat, welfare, and with Floriat, you're constantly working with dates. You're constantly having to get back to people to make sure that their editing's right, that they've given you the right essay, that actually they've written it at all. This issue, by the way, out 9th brunch, come get it. I'm going to have to make sure it's at the printer by the 28th, which means I need to think about designing starting tomorrow, which is the 21st, which means I need to have most articles in by the 16th, unless there's another reason why it shouldn't be, which means I need to send them out before the 9th so that they've got time to actually read it and accept or decline, in which case I reassign it. And I think with services, you do have to be very on it. I know that Jimmy's been on the phone every single day for these dryer services. If you take the Ents team, as a senior entertainment coordinator, what usually happens with events is that you get assigned a room each to then spearhead. And for example, if you're assigned to draping in the West Courtyard, making sure that's done, the furniture's all out the way, so then the fake lawn can be laid for ladies' night. And I think that idea of the little bits coming together as a whole is really crucial in terms of what Jimmy does for services, making sure that the menus are out, making sure that the spaces are released, making sure that people pay their pound on the door, just those little incremental things that come together to make a formal possible. And finally, with welfare, I think in particular the nightline training has really helped, because it completely changes how you think about talking to people. You're thinking about what you're saying and how you're saying it. You're making sure that if they're having a bit of a tough time, you're not being prescriptive and instantly trying to find a solution for them, but actually you're letting them vent whatever it is that's going on in their mind right now. And then you're helping them move forward. With welfare as it is, you're meant to be the kind of person that someone can come up to, that they can talk to. And as in relation for services, making sure that you're visible as a person, that yes, the printer is something that you come to for services, but also making sure that people feel that they can come to you and say, hey, the printer's broken, rather than being, some sort of member who's third year and as a fresher, you feel too intimidated to say so. And hopefully that's answered your question.
So under experience on my manifesto, I've listed West Courtyard rep, which works with the services manager. So I've already been working with Jimmy this year, looking after the West Courtyard, stocking the vending machine, collecting the money from it, and the coffee machine as well, looking after the papers and the JCR. So I think that's very relevant to the role of services manager. When I was in sixth form, I helped to run a youth club. This is the second point. And so I was in charge of basically getting stock in for the tuck shop and looking after the equipment that we had. There was a table football, table tennis, darts board, pool table, so similar sorts of things as well, all very relevant to the West Courtyard and the services that we have in the JCR. The rest of the points on my experience are things like Castle Badminton, mixed lacrosse, and UCBC, which all show a keen involvement in college and the fact that I do care about college and getting involved with things. And I think it's just the fact that it shows that I do care, and it's what I want to do, to look after college and make sure it's the best it can be. So yeah.
I think all the experience that anyone's got on their manifestos, be it Simon or Ed or any of us, is very generalised in a sense that it's there to show that we really want to be involved in college, that we have been involved in college, and that this decision to go for an exec position isn't a decision based on looking for glory or wanting to be in that nice Norman Gallery room and getting all the respect that comes with it. It's because we're showing that we have been involved for a long period of time, that everything that we do, we are doing because we want to be involved in college. I'm not going to go through the specific parts of the specific experience that I've put down, but I think I hope that sort of answers your question.
All right, guys, any more questions? Dement? Tom?
As service manager, you're one of the more physical exec roles in terms of what you do. And if you're not doing your job properly or something goes wrong, it's going to be very noticed by the rest of the college. How long do you think cope with that pressure, knowing that if you do mess something up, people are going to know we're not on this kind of thing for quite a bit of anger?
So this kind of ties in with why I'm going for this role in the first place, is because I really care that this role is done well, because when it's not, it affects me, it affects everyone. And so I think it's a lot the fact that I just care so much about what the role is and doing it well. So but I think I cope well with people coming to me with issues as well. As I said before, when I was working at Waitrose, I often had customers coming and complaining to me about things that were completely nothing to do with me, like the price of something, which obviously I'm not in charge of. But it's just a case of taking that on board and responding calmly to these things and listening and responding and doing what they need you to do.
I guess I'm just used to taking abuse, be it from anyone, all the way down to my housemate Tom, who regularly shouts at me and calls me a paedophile. So I can take it. I think that's a very simple answer to it. You can, if you just stay calm and collected about these things, you can get through anything.
None of my housemates call me a paedophile. So I don't really have that experience to deal with. I'm sorry, Tom. But that being said, how would I deal with the pressure of the job? I think it's a very fair point to make, and there are serious repercussions if services doesn't do their job well. But basically, what it comes down to, another thing I get stick for at home is how particular I am as a person, and I quite like list making and colour coordinating and that kind of a thing, which might seem irrelevant to your question, but there is a reason I brought it up. It's because I'm meticulous. You know, if it's tidiness in my room, or whether it's my diary and doing things to the hour, and whether it's making checklists to make sure that I send that email to this person, and I've Skyped my parents as well, all in the space of one day. The lots of little things that need to be done as part of services manager are actually quite compatible with the way my mind works in terms of compartmentalising, like a good tick next to things. But in terms of actually the pressure and taking this seriously and, getting abuse potentially, I'm quite thick-skinned. I keep getting told I got no banter, but I keep coming back, don't I? So, I'm so sorry. No, but I'm good with pressure. I thrive under pressure. It brings the best out in me. When I've got nothing to do, I tend to do nothing, but the more I have to do, the more productive I am as a person. That's why I think this role is sort of the reason I've applied for it.
Gibbs?
Obviously the role is about providing services to the JCR. How do you think, you talked about committees earlier, when you're thinking about prioritising services and what needs doing, how much of that do you think you should consult the JCR with, and how much of it do you think you should actually just make a decision on this point yourself?
I think on the whole, it should be a very democratic process. I really enjoyed, like for example, in the JCR meeting earlier this year, when it got asked to everyone in the JCR meeting how to spend some of the JCR surplus, and get some ideas from the crowd. It's a difficult question to answer because some decisions obviously do need to be made snappily, and obviously consultation over lots of people takes time. But personally, I feel that where possible, I would want to make it as democratic and open as possible, as much of the time.
Part of my manifesto was reviewing the titles and the newspapers that we subscribe to as a JCR, and I think in that sense everyone as members has a right to have their say and get what they want out of the services that college provides. In a similar fashion, it was really good in the JCR meetings last year when we were talking about how much to charge for formals and how much that would mean that we'd have to put aside from the JCR levy to make them, to keep them twice a week as they are. That it was taken by a vote, that we did all have a say. It wasn't just an enforced charge that you all had to make do with. So I can't really say anything that different to Sam, in that I think everyone having a say is important. That being said, I think it is crucial that as a services manager you can be there and make a decision, because after a certain point nothing would happen if you didn't. getting on with getting the dryer done, deciding that actually a new telly is what we need more than something else, or that the money would be best used for a sofa. That one probably, as democratic as possible, but when it calls for it, if there's something going wrong, then you need to make the decision and you need to take that decision, because I think it's also a time thing. You don't have the time to waste.
I think it's about striking a balance. If one of the points of my manifesto is represent the views of the JCR to the exec, and so I've told everyone that I've spoken to that I think it is so important that when we're making decisions, it is for the JCR, and the JCR are having a say in what's going on. So in most situations, I'd ideally like to talk to people in the JCR and check that any decision that is being made is what everyone wants it to be. But if there are situations where that's not feasible, or it's something that needs to be done really quickly, then obviously it would have to be something that the services manager would have to decide, and without consulting the whole JCR necessarily.
Right, Dom at the back.
Could you just give 3 ways that you try and improve food?
When I've been canvassing, it seems that the fresher year, correct me if I'm wrong, they've got a lot of vegans who aren't really being catered for correctly. And I think that if they were at home, they would be eating in a very different way. And if we were to find that Castle actually has a higher percentage of vegans than any other college, then we need to look into how they can get better protein through their beans and pulses, etc., in a way that they might not be at the minute. I think that if people are vegetarian, and this isn't to say that there haven't been improvements made on the food, but if people are vegetarian and they're finding that the food is too stodgy, it's always risottos or it's always gnocchis, then you need to look at other alternatives that are lighter, so they don't keep feeling that they're not eating right. And as for the third way to improve the food, I think that would really be up to the JCR in general. If there was something that they were finding, and people who don't necessarily have a certain restriction on their diet but just aren't happy with something, or equally are really happy with something and want to see more of it, fielding suggestions to food committee and then relaying it to catering committee is really important.
I think this is something that I'd like to talk to people in the JCR about. I wouldn't make any kind of decision on it just based on what I think about the food. I think in general the food is quite carb-based. I've definitely had meals that have been like risotto with rice and chips and potato and pasta. So it might be making more of a variety, maybe not having chips quite so often, or a different kind of looking at. I don't know that there's things that I would particularly want to change for myself, but it would be something that I'd like to talk to other people and find out what people actually want done in the JCR and done with the food.
Pretty much all what I'd have said has been covered. A lot of people that I canvassed, like Isla, said that they really weren't happy with the vegetarian food, so I'd start off with that. I'd also look at those carbs as well. I think the servery staff seem to think that if they change the shape of the potatoes or change them from a lattice to a circle, they think we won't notice. So I changed that. And I guess I remember last year there'd be loads of days where there were 3 things that I really wanted to eat, and then the next day there'd be none. So I guess I'd try and make it as consistent as possible.
Okay, we'll go to Callum right at the back.
To what extent do you see the role of services managers as one that is progressive as opposed to a role that's simply trying to maintain the status quo for services in the college? And to that end, what specific initiatives should you change things?
I think largely services manager is about maintaining the status quo and keeping everything working and functioning. Although if there are any improvements that people would want to make, then it's important to do that as well. Again, it's about striking a balance. If there were changes that I would like to make, I'd like to look at doing something about Moatside Gym, because at the moment it's not really that great. It'd be nice to have some air conditioning in there and some music and stuff. And I'd like to look at maybe getting a pinball table. I'd like to look at getting a change machine as well, because it's really a nightmare when you're going to do your washing. I was saving up 20p's for the pool table and for washing last year. So getting a change machine so that people who want to play pool don't have to go to the toasty bar and ask for change, and people who want to buy a toasty don't have to go to the undie to ask for change. So yeah.
I've said this a lot in my canvassing. First and foremost, I do think it is very much a status quo job, because there's not really much point in changing something that, as far as I'm concerned, works pretty well. Having said that, I don't, obviously there's a lot of tradition in Castle, and we've got a lot of pride in that, but I don't think we should always be sticking with methods that we've stuck with for a long time. We should always be challenging how we do things. And to that end, I would, like I said earlier, I think every decision that's made should be done, or almost every decision that's made should be done in a very democratic and open way. As to how I would actually, it's difficult you use the word initiatives. I think that's quite a difficult one to use, but like I said, keeping everything open, democratic, and maybe making sure that people can make suggestions about how things can be changed, and if they do have complaints about the way the JCR's run, then they can do that. Be that in JCR meetings, or if people either can't attend or don't feel confident enough to voice their opinion, then have some kind of suggestions box that people can put suggestions into.
Yeah, I've really just got to answer in the same way that Christabel and Sam have. In a sense, it is just maintaining things as they are, making sure that when things are broken, you're there to provide, the help that needs, and actually to make sure that if you can, before it breaks, that you're just maintaining it and making sure it's working well. Where things aren't working, and I think, and Jimmy's done an absolutely amazing job this year, but the only problem maybe is that some people don't know exactly how far services reaches, and they don't know exactly that Jimmy is in charge of certain things, well, or any services manager, that is. And I think having a vehicle where you could say, this is great, I want more, this isn't working so well, or this is broken, it needs fixing, such as a suggestion box, would be really useful. Equally, just sending a quick email is really good, and making progress that way. I said surveys for, looking at the different titles, for example, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It can just be, meeting, and if you see an exec member, they're meant to be approachable, going up to them and saying so. If you have a new idea that we haven't thought of, it doesn't mean that it's, doesn't have to mean that it's not possible, and we can look into it.
Right, we've got time for a couple more questions. So, Joe?
I think it's all about awareness. I think that you used food.com as an example. I'm not sure how many people actually know that exists and know that they can. I said this a lot when I was canvassing. People don't seem to know that it exists and that people can make complaints about the food if they want to. I can't really say much more than just general awareness and get people involved.
I think food committee is a funny one, because you're never going to get as high a turnout as the JCR meeting, for example. But I think the JCR meeting being at 8 p.m. on a Sunday usually is really good, because most people happen to be free at that time. Whereas I think there have been 2 food committee meetings so far this year, and they've both been at all the time, and even I haven't been able to go because I've got a seminar on. I think one of the last ones was Monday at 2 p.m, which especially for science students is just definite no-go. So it's not just a case of you being able to ping, say, oh, a services manager, ping me an email, but I think it's also you knowing that there is a discussion on at a time where you might not have anything else on. So doing it in the evenings might be a really good idea on a Sunday. You know, I think Jimmy's done a great job in terms of sending out emails. I didn't really know my first year when Food Committee was on. Now I do. It just happens that I can't go. So that's the next step in terms of getting people to it, is changing the time.
I think I personally would like to go around talking to people and find out what they actually think about things. I think a good way of getting a lot of views on people is online, is if we have like surveys and stuff, or votes. I think it might be a good idea to have just an online form that people can fill in if they've got any issues, or if they want to say anything about the JCR or about the services or anything like that, so that it can just feed straight back to me, and they don't even have to put their name on it. They can just have their view put on there and just send it straight to me or whoever the services manager is.
Right, looking at the clock, we've probably got time for one more, so I think Chris has had his hand up for quite a while over there.
In private, Jimmy describes himself as the best services manager ever. What would you do to improve on what Jimmy's done this year?
Yeah, I think I've kind of alluded to it earlier. Constructive criticism-wise, I think it's just getting it out there what is under the services manager's jurisdiction. Canvassing people, some of you have come up with some really great suggestions, and I felt really bad, but having read the standing orders, I've had to turn around and say, actually, that's not my business. But I'll relay it to someone who it is. It's just sort of getting out where services can help you, and equally, if it's not services that can help you, who can. It's also a thing where a lot of people don't really know what Jimmy does, but he does it so well that he almost, you don't see him. It's only when something goes wrong that you do. And so he isn't paid the credit he deserves. So he has done a really great job. But I think it's just that awareness of what the services manager realms are is how I would improve it.
I think this year there has definitely been a huge improvement in how the services have been run compared to recent years. But as for improving it more, I agree with Isla that I think it does need to be more publicised who services manager is and what they actually do, because so many people don't know who they need to go to and don't know how to get in contact. So I think this online anonymous form that people can fill in would be a good way of addressing that issue. I'd also like to look at doing Livers Out Brunch for maybe like once a term or something to get people to come back into college, because that's something that didn't happen this year, and I really miss being in college, so I'd like to look at doing that as well.
Isla's just said that a good services manager is the one that's hardly ever seen, and even though Jimmy's done a great job, we all know who he is and we see him quite a lot. So I guess I'd try and be more of an invisible man and be seen even less.
I think if that's what we want to finish on, unless someone has a different type of question they'd like to ask before we wrap it up.
No, it's good. We're fine.
No? Gibbs has one.
The current services manager has been known for his controversial jokes. Do you please tell us a joke, controversial or otherwise?
Okay, so a guy broke up with one of my friends last week because she wouldn't stop touching pasta. Now she's feeling cannelloni.
Did you hear about the cross-eyed teacher who lost her job? She couldn't control her pupils.
This is my go-to joke for any situation. There's a blonde walking down the street and she gets stopped by a policeman. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to do you for public indecency." She looks down to her left black breast, hanging out her blouse. "Oh, damn, I left the baby on the bus again."
Right, I'd say that's probably going to be the last question. We've got SLO Hustings next, but voting for service manager will open after SLO Hustings. So if we've got a round of applause for the candidates.